When did you stop pretending your parents did their best? They said they did their best, while locking the fridge and blaming me for things I didn't break. I believed them, until I saw what they did with my college forms. It's funny what you can convince yourself of when it's your own family. I used to tell people my parents were just strict or old-fashioned. Like that excused the way my mom would hide food in her bedroom, and my dad would unplug the router every night and say it was to keep our brains from rotting. I didn't think anything of it when I had to wear the same shoes for 3 years, or when my siblings and I took turns pretending to be sick so we could skip dinner without raising suspicion. It was normal. Our version of it anyway. Until I hit 17 and everything started to feel different, off. Not louder, not more violent, just colder. My sister Katie moved out first. She was 19 and gone before I finished 10th grade. Left a note, said this place will swallow you whole if you let it. I still have that note. Still wonder if she ever meant to come back for me. Then it was my older brother. He didn't leave, he just disappeared inside the house, stopped talking to anyone, started spending hours in the basement studying or whatever he called it. When I tried to knock once, our dad opened the door instead, said he's busy, don't distract him, he's got a future, and I guess I didn't. I wasn't the smart one. I wasn't the pretty one. I was the quiet one, the background kid, the one who didn't make noise, didn't get in trouble. Didn't need much. So when junior year came and I started asking about college, about applications, about FOFSA and deadlines and transcripts, my mom just said, we'll take care of it. I believed her, I always did. I filled out the personal essays, stayed up rewriting them in the dark with a flashlight because I wasn't allowed to have the desk lamp on after 10. I printed out everything, put it all in a neat folder, handed it to her. She smiled, said, you don't need to worry about this part. Weeks went by, then months. I got a letter from one of the schools, a thin envelope. It said they never received my financial aid forms, that I could still submit them late, but I'd missed priority consideration. I asked my mom about it. She frowned, acted surprised. Must have been a mail issue, she said. We'll look into it. I asked for the tracking number. She said she didn't have one. I asked if she'd submitted the FOFSA online. She said no, she didn't trust computers. I believed her again. But something shifted in me after that. A quiet kind of skepticism. A whisper in the back of my head that said, maybe this wasn't about mistakes, maybe it was on purpose. I waited until the house was empty one day. I went into the basement, found my brother's old laptop, booted it up, it still worked, logged into his email, nothing useful there, but I found a draft folder. Inside was a full FOFSA application for me, already filled, already submitted. Dated weeks before I even handed my mother the folder, but the email tied to it wasn't mine, it was hers, her email, her contact info. And the direct deposit section listed a bank account I'd never seen before. I copied it down. I didn't understand it yet, not fully, but I knew I'd found something. That night at dinner I didn't say anything, just watched her. She talked about church like always. My dad complained about gas prices. My brother chewed with his mouth open, and I sat there, smiling while the whole house slowly unwrapped itself in my mind. I started digging more, quietly, carefully. Printed out my own credit report at school. Found 2 inquiries I didn't recognize, both from private loan agencies. I hadn't applied to them, but someone had, under my name, with my social. One of them had already been denied. The other was marked approved, pending disbursement. I took it to the guidance counselor. She looked concerned but said there wasn't much she could do without proof. Parents have a lot of legal access to their kids' info, she said, even if it's questionable. I asked if I could still apply on my own. She said it'd be tough since it looked like a parent had already opened a claim. That word stuck with me, claim. Like I was an asset, a number, a tool to access funds. That's when it really started unraveling. I confronted my mom that night, quietly, behind closed doors. I showed her the loan approval notice. I asked, did you sign this? She stared at it, didn't blink, then said, you're underage. It's not your place to worry about these things. But it's in my name, I said. It'll follow me forever. She smiled. Then you better make it worth it. I don't remember much else from that night. Just her voice, calm and cold. Just the way she closed the door behind her as if nothing had happened. As if I wasn't even a person, just a path to something she wanted. I didn't sleep. I started staying late at school, applying to scholarships in secret, using fake addresses, changing passwords. I told the financial aid offices that I was independent. Some believed me, most didn't. But I got into one school, community college, half an hour away. They offered me enough to cover books and part of tuition, if I could prove my situation. That meant paperwork. That meant risk. That meant war. And I wasn't ready for war, not yet. So I waited. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA and a smile so tight it cracked my lips. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. Said they had other things. But I knew better. They didn't want to sit in a room where I was being celebrated for something I did without them. I took a photo with my favorite teacher, printed it, put it in a frame I bought at Goodwill. That's still the only graduation picture I own. The summer after graduation was quiet, too quiet. My dad was suddenly very interested in my college plans, asked about dates, dorms, refunds. I lied, told him I was deferring. He seemed disappointed, but not in me. In the timing, I started saving cash, babysitting, cleaning houses, anything I could do without paper trails. Then one day I came home to find my room half-packed, my clothes folded, boxes taped, my laptop gone. I asked what was going on. My mom said, "You're moving in with your cousin for the fall, to save money." I never agreed to that, I said. She smiled again. We made arrangements. Be grateful, that word again, grateful. Like I owed them for the roof they held over my head like a weapon. I didn't go. I called the college, explained everything. They said they'd try to help. That if I could just get one affidavit, one counselor's letter, I might still qualify as independent. I asked the counselor. She wrote it. I cried in the office. She hugged me, told me I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal, that parents weren't supposed to use you like currency. I wish I believed her back then, because the truth is, I still wanted to. I still wanted to believe they meant well, that maybe they just didn't know better. But they knew. They always knew. I didn't tell anyone where I went when I finally left. I packed at night. Took only what I could carry in 2 trash bags and the old duffel my sister left behind. I left the framed graduation photo face down on my mattress and walked out the back door. The air felt heavier than it should have. Like the house didn't want to let go. I took the bus 2 towns over and stayed with a girl from class who owed me a favor. Her name was Bree. We weren't close, but she didn't ask questions. She gave me the couch, and an extra key and a blanket that smelled like dog hair and vanilla. It was the safest I'd felt in years. For the next few weeks I started building a real life from the bottom up. No bank account, no stable address, no family support. But I had the college, I had the scholarship, I had just enough. I got a job shelving books at the campus library and picked up shifts at a diner across the street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, my name, my hours, my choice. And then, just when it started to feel like I might be okay, I got a voicemail from my dad. Just his voice, calm, cold. Like always, he said, "If you're not going to come home, the least you can do is sign the documents." No context, no hello, no explanation, just that. I didn't call back, but I saved the message, played it over and over again, wondering what documents he meant, wondering if he even cared where I was, or if he just needed something signed. A week later I found out what he meant. My student account froze. Financial aid flagged for unverified information. I went to the office. They handed me a packet, copies of tax forms, but not mine, my parents', documents I'd never seen, but with my name all over them. Signed, dated, submitted, falsely. Someone had tried to reclassify me as dependent. After all the paperwork I fought for, after everything I proved, they were trying to drag me back on paper, pull me into their orbit by force. I was furious, not just at them, at myself, for letting my guard down, for thinking maybe distance was enough, for forgetting that control doesn't require your presence, it just needs access. I called the lawyer's line the school referred me to. They said they'd seen it before. Parents who couldn't stand the idea of their kids moving without them, who used tax forms and signatures like barbed wire. The legal aid worker on the phone said, "You can fight this, but it'll take time." Time was something I didn't have. Rent was due. My scholarship couldn't disperse without clearance. My work hours weren't enough yet. I was living off 2 granola bars a day and free crackers from the diner. I started sleeping in the student lounge between classes, pretending I was just resting when people walked by. I stopped answering texts. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it had gotten. But one night Bree found me curled up in the corner of the library, holding a peanut butter packet like it was gold. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me, then handed me a $10 bill and said, "You matter more than what they did to you." I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. It wasn't about the money. It was about someone seeing me, really seeing me, not as a problem to fix, not as a risk to contain, just as a person who'd been through more than anyone had a right to and was still trying. That night, I wrote everything down, every form, every forged signature, every email, every voicemail. I put it in a binder. I printed 2 copies. I dropped one off at the legal aid office the next morning and mailed the other to myself, sealed and certified, just in case. And then I filed the affidavit again. Hard copies, witnesses, full statement. They reviewed it, investigated, and after 2 more weeks the freeze lifted, my scholarship hit, my dorm request was approved, and for the first time in my life I had a door I could lock from the inside that didn't come with strings attached. But I never really stopped looking over my shoulder, because people like that, my parents, they don't like losing, they don't like silence, they like control, they like fear, they like access, and now they had none, which meant they were probably planning their next move. The silence from them didn't feel like peace, it felt like waiting, like a held breath. Like the eye of a storm that hadn't passed, just paused. I kept expecting something. A letter, a voicemail, an unexpected visit. For a while, nothing came. I focused on school, on work. I let myself believe maybe they'd given up. Maybe exposure, losing their grip was enough to make them stop. I even started sleeping better. Until October. I was leaving the library after a late shift when I noticed someone standing near the back gate of campus. Too still. Too familiar. I kept walking, heart racing, pretending I didn't notice. When I got to my dorm, there was an envelope taped to the door. No name, no address, just taped there like an afterthought. Inside were copies of photos. Old ones from childhood. Me in the backyard holding a plastic microphone. Me at the kitchen table with cereal and a missing front tooth. Me with Katie, the only day we matched outfits. And on the back of one was a sticky note, "We still have your things. You'll want to come home eventually." No signature. But I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting. I stared at that note for a long time. It wasn't a threat, not directly. But it wasn't comfort either. It was control, a reminder that no matter how far I went, they still had a piece of me. My past, my stuff, my story. I threw the note away, burned the photos in a metal mixing bowl in the dorm bathroom at 2 a.m., watched the paper curl and blacken, until there was nothing left but smoke and silence. After that, I stopped using my real address on anything. I rerouted mail through the school office, got a P.O. box 2 towns over. I started paying for everything in cash where I could, logged out of all old email accounts, changed my number, told no one. The more invisible I became, the safer I felt, but I couldn't help the questions. Why now? Why that message? What were they trying to pull me back into? A few weeks later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just one sentence. "Do you still have Katie's key?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about that key in years. Katie gave it to me the day she left. A small silver thing with a tiny black star on the handle. For emergencies, she said, or escape. I'd kept it on a string around my neck for months before hiding it in the lining of an old jacket. I hadn't told anyone about it. No one even knew I had it until now. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. But I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head, the wording. It wasn't, "Do you have a key?" It was, "Do you still have it?" As if whoever sent it knew I did. As if they'd been counting on me holding on to it. The next day, I skipped class and took the bus to a storage unit 2 towns away. One I rented under a different name. I pulled out the jacket, reached into the lining. The key was still there, cold, heavy, untouched. But now it felt dangerous, like it opened something I wasn't supposed to remember. Something buried. Katie never told me where it went. She just said it was for later. I didn't know if she meant years later or one night when things got really bad. But now someone wanted it. Someone who wasn't Katie. Someone who knew enough to ask about it. I tried calling her. The number didn't work. I tried messaging her on the old app we used. No response. I searched her name. Nothing current. The last social post was 3 years old, a blurry photo of a lake with no caption. Comments turned off. I started to wonder if she'd gone ghost on purpose, or if someone else had made her disappear. I didn't sleep for days after that. Because the more I looked, the more I realized I didn't actually know anything about where she'd gone. Just that she'd left. Just that she'd warned me. And now I was the one holding the key, and the questions that came with it. I kept the key in a locked box after that. I didn't want it near me while I slept. Every time I looked at it, my heart raced for reasons I couldn't explain. It was just a piece of metal, but it felt like it knew too much. I started asking quiet questions around campus. No one had seen Katie. I checked alumni records. Nothing. She never graduated from her last known school. No forwarding info. No listed job. I even emailed the registrar pretending to be a potential employer. The response said there was no record of degree completion. I checked the last address I remembered her using, a P.O. box in a town near our old neighborhood, canceled 2 years ago. No forwarding information. I called one of her old friends, Jamie, from middle school, someone she used to write notes to in class. Jamie didn't pick up but sent back a single text. Haven't heard from her in a long time. "You too, huh?" I asked if she remembered Katie giving anyone else a key. She wrote back, "She gave me one. I threw it away, was too scared to keep it. Didn't feel like a normal key." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Didn't feel like a normal key. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't ask. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer yet. That same week, I got a letter in the mail. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from a bank I'd never used, addressed to me. Inside was a notification of account closure. A savings account in my name. Balance $0. Last transaction, withdrawal to an unknown third-party brokerage. I called the bank, gave them my info. They said the account was opened 4 years ago. I was 17. A minor. I asked for the application paperwork. They said it had been mailed to my permanent address. When I asked what that address was, they read back my parents' old house. I asked who closed the account. They said it was done online. Password authenticated, security questions answered. I asked what the questions were. The rep paused. "Your childhood best friend and your first stuffed animal," she said. Both answers were correct. The problem, I never listed those as my security questions. I never opened that account. But someone had. Someone who knew me well enough to guess those answers, or dig them out of something I'd written years ago. And someone who'd waited until I was no longer paying attention to quietly empty it. It wasn't about the money. That account could have held $10 or 10,000. I wouldn't have cared. It was the pattern, the consistency, the control. My whole life they'd made decisions behind my back and told me they were for my own good. But this was different. This was deliberate erasure. A slow, systematic attempt to strip me of anything they didn't own. I didn't know what scared me more. That they were still doing it, or that they'd never actually stopped. That maybe the silence I'd mistaken for distance was just preparation. I went back to the legal aid office, brought the letter, the loan paperwork, the photos, the text about Katie's key. The woman I'd been working with sat me down, looked me in the eyes and said, "This is no longer just about your college forms. This is coordinated." I asked, "What does that mean?" She said, "It means someone is intentionally using your identity, your history, and your fear to keep you stuck. Whether it's your parents or someone acting through them, they're not finished." That night, I opened a new notebook. I wrote down every strange moment I could remember from childhood, every time a form went missing, every time a password suddenly stopped working, every time someone said, "We'll handle it," and then nothing ever got done. The list was long, longer than I expected. I showed it to Daniel, a guy from my sociology class who'd started walking me to my dorm after study sessions. He listened quietly as I read a few entries out loud. Then he said something I'll never forget. "They didn't raise you, they managed you." I didn't cry, I wanted to, but the words hit too clean, too sharp, because he was right. I'd spent my entire life not being raised, not being seen, but being managed, shaped, pushed, coerced into being easy. And now that I wasn't easy anymore, they didn't know what to do with me, except erase me, replace me, reclaim me through paper and policy and silence. I told him about the key, about Katie. He asked if I'd ever tried it anywhere. I said no. He said maybe I should. Maybe there's a reason it keeps showing up. Maybe Katie left it for more than escape. Maybe she left it for evidence. And I think part of me already knew that I waited 3 more days before I tried the key. I don't know what I was waiting for. A sign, a reason, maybe just the courage to open something that might never be closable again. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even Daniel. I took a bus toward the old neighborhood where we used to live before everything fell apart, the place Katie left from. I hadn't been back in years. The streets looked the same but smaller. Like time had deflated them. The corner store still had the same faded sign, but the windows were barred now. Our old church was boarded up. The trees were thinner, even the air felt like it had less oxygen. I walked without looking at anyone. Just counted intersections. I didn't know where I was going until my feet stopped in front of the house on Lexington Avenue. The one Katie used to walk past every day on her way to the bus stop. The one she always stared at but never explained. It was one of those plain, square houses people forget how to describe. One-story, pale brick, side gate rusted open. I went around the back. The gate creaked. There was a cellar door half covered by rotting leaves and a broken rake. I didn't know how I knew it was the one, I just did. I cleared the leaves. The lock was still there, old, discolored. But it matched the key. My hands shook when I turned it. The lock clicked. The door stuck at first like it hadn't been opened in years. Then it gave way, groaning like it didn't want to cooperate. The stairs were dark and narrow. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped down slowly. One step, then another. Each footfall sounded too loud. The smell hit first, dust, old paper, rusted metal, and something else. Something like forgotten things. The basement wasn't large, just a square space with 3 old metal cabinets, a wooden desk, and a single folding chair. On the desk sat a shoebox wrapped in duct tape. A name written across the top in permanent marker. Not mine, not Katie's, our father's. I stared at it, my breath slowed. I took out my phone and took a picture. Then I peeled the tape back. Inside were files, dozens of them, loose paper, old forms, scanned IDs, loan applications, copies of report cards, emails printed and highlighted. Some of them were mine, some were Katie's, some were from people I didn't recognize. But the pattern was clear. Every piece of paper was a thread pulled from a life that didn't belong to him, used, rewritten, pinned to someone else's gain. One folder was labeled fallbacks. Inside were 10 copies of FOFSA applications. Same names, different years, slightly altered addresses. Katie's info, mine, our cousin Melissa's, even Jamie's. The forms weren't just filled, they were signed, dated, submitted. Some had notes in the margins. Use mother's maiden, delay until mid-cycle, check for Pell. The level of detail was surgical, professional. This wasn't casual fraud. It was a system, built over years, hidden under silence and shame. I found a second box, this one smaller, heavier. Inside was a phone. Old, cracked. But it powered on. One video file, no label. I played it, at first just static, then footage, grainy, angled too low. Katie's face. She looked tired, thin, scared but defiant. She looked straight into the lens and said, "If you're watching this, you probably already know, I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I was about to become just another asset, another file. He found a way to make us useful. Not as daughters, not as people, but as leverage, paperwork, loans, things we didn't ask for, things we can't undo. If I disappear, know it wasn't an accident. If you find this, don't go back. Just burn it all and keep going." I dropped the phone, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I sat on the floor, just sat there. The silence in the basement was deafening. I thought I was prepared for this. I wasn't, because now it wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about stolen money or broken trust. It was about intent, about method, about how far someone would go to build a life out of the pieces of their own children. I gathered what I could, photographed everything, took the phone, left the rest. I didn't look back when I locked the cellar. I didn't speak the entire bus ride home. When I got back to campus, Daniel was waiting outside the dorm. He looked at me like he knew something had changed. I didn't say a word, just handed him the phone, pressed play. He didn't ask questions, didn't interrupt, just watched. When the video ended, he looked at me and said, "We need to go to the police." I said, "They won't do anything. Not yet. Not unless I'm missing, or dead." He was silent. Then he asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked him in the eye. What Katie couldn't. The next morning I made copies of everything, the documents, the video, the file names, the post-it notes, even the basement address. I created a secure drive, backed it up twice, encrypted it, and emailed it to myself and a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in weeks. I didn't include a message, just the subject line, in case something happens. I knew I sounded paranoid. But I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was trying to stay ahead of a pattern. One that Katie warned about. One I'd already seen unfold around me. Quiet manipulation, controlled information, threats that never sounded like threats. And then always something missing. A voice, a file, a person. I didn't want to be the next thing erased. I started sleeping in public places again, the library, the student center, even in Daniel's car once when he stayed parked near my building just in case. I checked the lock on my dorm door 4 times a night. I stopped using campus Wi-Fi. Everything felt like it could be used against me. And I wasn't wrong. Because a week later I got an email from the registrar's office saying my withdrawal request had been processed. I never submitted one. I called in a panic. They said the request came through the student portal. Same login, same password. "You must have authorized it," the staff member said. "The system logs match your account." I rushed to IT. I begged them to pull the logs. The IP address wasn't mine. Not even close. Out of state. Proxy masked. They launched an internal investigation. Temporarily paused the withdrawal. But the damage had started. Professors stopped emailing me. My financial aid stalled again. My scholarship coordinator asked for a clarifying letter explaining my status. I was drowning, and still, nothing from my parents, not a single message, which somehow made it worse, because it meant they weren't trying to fix it. They were watching, waiting. Or maybe they weren't watching at all. Maybe this was just what happened when you tried to carve yourself out of someone else's story. The people holding the pen didn't like that. I called the lawyer again, told her about the withdrawal, about the video. She went quiet. Then asked, "Have you considered going public?" I said no. That scared me more than anything. What would I even say? That my parents used me for paperwork. That my sister may have vanished to survive. That my whole life feels like a blueprint someone else keeps revising, she said. "You have enough for a case. Not necessarily criminal yet, but civil. We could file to lock your identity, sue for damages. But it will be long, hard, public. And you'll have to testify." I said I'd think about it. Then I hung up and stared at the wall for over an hour. Because I didn't want justice, not really. I wanted distance. I wanted the freedom to forget, to move on, to build something that didn't come with footnotes and disclaimers and hidden agendas. But that's not how any of this works. You don't just walk away from a fire and expect it not to follow the wind. That weekend, Daniel drove us out of town, just for a day. No plan, no destination. We ended up at a lake we'd never been to, sat in the car and watched kids skip rocks while parents yelled about sunscreen. I hadn't been near that kind of scene in years. One where families didn't flinch when someone spoke too loud, where kids didn't apologize just for asking for juice. I felt like a stranger watching a planet I'd never been invited to. Daniel asked me what I remembered most about growing up. I told him the fridge padlock, and the sound it made when she unlocked it. He asked why. I said because it reminded me that even food wasn't mine, even hunger had a schedule. He didn't say anything, just reached over and held my hand. That was the first time I realized I didn't want revenge. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted to unlearn. To unlearn the silence, the shame, the twitch in my fingers when someone says, "We'll take care of it." And I immediately picture paperwork going missing. But first, I needed to know what happened to Katie. I owed her that much. I started where I could, the storage unit rental place she used once. They didn't keep old records past 2 years, but the clerk, a woman in her 50s with purple glasses and chipped nail polish, offered to check the bin for old keys that hadn't been claimed. She came back 10 minutes later with a dusty metal box. Inside was a Ziploc bag labeled 13K, Katie's old unit number. The bag had a key, an envelope, and a yellow sticky note that said, "Don't let them reset it again." I took the envelope outside before I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and an old receipt from a gas station. The paper had just one line, handwritten in Katie's exact cursive, Check the attic if he hasn't burned it yet. That sentence haunted me. If he hasn't burned it. If, she wasn't sure. Which meant she hadn't been back. Which meant she wasn't working with them. Which meant I had to go back to that house. The house I hadn't stepped foot in since the day I left with 2 trash bags and a scholarship I almost lost. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. I took a bus, walked the last mile. The yard looked the same, overgrown, weeds through the cracks, faded paint on the porch. The curtains were drawn, no car in the driveway. I knew they were probably gone for the weekend. My mother always insisted on Sunday flea markets 2 counties over. I didn't knock. I still had the back gate code. They'd never changed it. The door was locked, but the frame had a give and I still knew how to pop it. I slipped inside like I never left. The air was stale, the couch was new, or at least new to them. But everything else was the same. Same calendar from 2 years ago, same magnets on the fridge, same Bible verse taped to the microwave. I moved quietly like muscle memory. The attic hatch was in the hallway closet. I pulled it down slowly, trying not to think. The ladder creaked, dust rained down. I climbed 1 rung at a time, each one heavier than the last. The attic was mostly insulation and old boxes. Nothing labeled, just the smell of heat and time. I used my phone flashlight again. At the far corner was a pile of banker's boxes, some covered with trash bags. I opened the first one. Inside were stacks of mail, not sorted, some unopened. All addressed to people I recognized, but not all of them lived here. Some were cousins, old neighbors. A few I didn't even know. One name appeared over and over, Samantha Green. I don't know why that name stuck with me, maybe because it was the only one that had its own folder. A red one. Inside were copies of tax forms, school transcripts, a high school diploma, even a birth certificate. I flipped through the pages. Something was wrong. The dates matched my own. The GPA was mine, the essay was mine. But the name wasn't. Someone had built a version of me, under a new identity, a girl named Samantha Green with my life, my scores, my details. But not my name, not my future. And suddenly I remembered something from years ago. My mother on the phone with someone, whispering, she doesn't need to know, as long as the numbers match. I didn't know what she meant then. I thought it was about a bill, but now I understood. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd built another me. Maybe for fallback, maybe for control, maybe as a backup to cash in on if I ever stopped playing along. I took the folder, all of it. I checked the rest of the boxes, found more aliases, different combinations of our real names, Katie, mine, even my brother's, each one tied to a version of us that didn't know we existed. I heard a car door slam. I froze, listened. Silence, maybe a neighbor, maybe nothing. But I didn't wait. I climbed down fast, heart in my throat. Left through the side yard, didn't look back, took a rideshare home and paid in cash. When I got back I didn't cry. I scanned every document, labeled everything, created another backup drive. I texted Daniel, asked him to meet me in the library. When he saw the red folder he just said, "That's not your name." "It is now," I said. "Or it was. Or it could have been." He flipped through the pages. "Do you think she used it?" "Who, your mom?" "I don't know," I said. "Or maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it's Katie. Or someone who needed clean papers." "You think Katie sold your info?" he asked. "No," I said quickly. "I don't, but I think she knew, and I think she left that note because she didn't want to be part of it anymore." "So what do we do now?" Daniel asked. I stared at the screen, at the name Samantha Green, at the transcript that listed my grades but not my school. I said, "We find out how far this goes. We find out how many versions of me are out there." I spent the next 3 months unraveling it like a map someone drew in pencil and tried to erase. Every new lead opened 5 more. I found 4 different FOFSA applications under 4 different names, all with my birth date. A dentist bill from Ohio under Katie's birthday. A rental agreement in Nevada signed 2 years after she disappeared. I found records of someone using my high school records to apply for a nursing program in Florida. They never finished. Dropped out mid-semester. No photos, no known address, but the email matched one my mother used when I was 13. An old Hotmail she said she deleted. The more I looked, the more I saw it wasn't just identity theft. It was a system. A web, built out of every part of us they could monetize, our grades, our health, our addresses, even our trauma. Katie's hospital stay from when she was 14, reimbursed under a different name. My speech therapy as a kid, filed twice under 2 insurance plans. And the worst part was, I didn't even know who else was in on it. There were signatures that weren't mine, but looked like mine. There were emails I swore I never sent. One application had a scanned photo of me smiling from a school trip, one I never gave them. Someone had been collecting every piece of my life like evidence, only to repurpose it into something profitable. And through it all, silence from my parents. Not a call, not a message, not even a denial. Like they were waiting to see if I'd burn out before it got serious. But I didn't burn out, I burned through. I filed a case with the state attorney. I gave everything to the lawyer. I gave statements, provided documents. I went through interviews and affidavit reviews, and 3 sessions with an investigator who asked if I felt emotionally exploited, and I laughed because I didn't even know what part of this wasn't emotional exploitation. But I still didn't get what I really wanted. Not justice, not money, not even an apology. I wanted to understand why. And the closest I ever came to an answer was when I found an old voicemail from my dad saved in an archive, a voice I hadn't heard in over a year. He said, "We did what we had to, we gave you everything we could, you were expensive, you always were. Don't pretend you didn't benefit from what we built." I listened to it 4 times, then I deleted it, because that's what it always came back to. They thought I owed them my existence. That because they fed me and clothed me and paid for a roof, even if it was conditional and cold and always used as leverage, they could justify taking everything else. My name, my future, my trust. They didn't raise children. They raised assets, and when those assets started thinking for themselves, they cut us loose or tried to rein us back in. But I was done being a product. I legally changed my name, filed the paperwork, got a new ID, new social, everything. I didn't even pick a name I loved, I just picked one they'd never think of. I stopped looking for Katie. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me like them, but I think she didn't want to be found. I think she left behind just enough for someone else to survive. Maybe me, maybe not. And I think she was trying to make peace with the fact that her story might have to end so someone else's could start. The last thing I found was a box at the bottom of that old storage unit. I almost missed it. It was labeled MISC, inside were cassette tapes. Old ones. Labeled in faded ink, 1997, Crying. Piano Lesson, 2003, Argument, Dinner, 2008, Lock Clicks. They were sound recordings, our lives broken into moments, surveillance disguised as memory, proof in case anyone ever said it didn't happen that way. I played one. I heard myself crying. I couldn't have been more than 7, and my mother's voice, flat and cold, "This is why no one likes you," click, and that was enough. I burned them all. Watched the plastic warp and melt in a rusted grill behind a gas station I didn't remember arriving at. And when it was all ash, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not freedom, not closure, just quiet. A silence that wasn't waiting for the next hit, a quiet that belonged to me. I don't know what happens next. I still flinch when the phone rings. I still triple-check every file I upload. I still wonder if Katie ever made it to wherever she was going. But I sleep, I eat, I laugh at things I wasn't allowed to laugh at before. And every once in a while I get mail addressed to a name that isn't mine anymore. I don't open it. I just write in black marker, "Return to sender. No one here by that name."